Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Wheeler and today I'm going to talk about Hoard of the Dragon Queen Episode 2. This is the Raiders Camp. I've already done a video on Hoard of the Dragon Queen, the introduction, and Episode 1, Greenest in Flames, and I will provide a link in the description and at the end of the video so that you can watch that if you want to. I might even put a card up at the top somewhere. I don't know which side it's going to appear on, so that you can go to that video if you haven't seen that video already. And this particular chapter requires quite a lot on the Dungeon Master. In fact, it looks really easy, but it is not that easy. And I'll give you the reasons why, because I've had to write some notes, otherwise I couldn't have coped. You'll find most of the content for this particular chapter, it requires the Dungeon Master to create a lot of material themselves. It also assumes that the Dungeon Master is quite experienced and not a new Dungeon Master. So I don't recommend this for new Dungeon Masters simply because it requires a lot of on-the-fly decisions. There's so many different ways this thing can go, and hence it's quite a difficult adventure to run, particularly this chapter. But I found this one of the most fun chapters or episodes of the entire adventure to run, simply because my players were awesome. And that's probably the only reason it worked out well for me. They made good decisions and things progressed well. Okay, so first off, this is the first hardcover book produced for Dungeons & Dragons 5e. It is part of the Tyranny of Dragons storyline, if you weren't aware of that. What do you got here, Jack? So is Rise of the Dragon Queen supposed to play after this book? Okay, the Rise of Tiamat is supposed to play after Hoard of the Dragon Queen. That's the sequence of events, the official sequence of events, but I'm going to give you what I understand to be the correct way of doing it. It's dependent on what happens in your story. There's actually 3 adventures, 2 official and 1 unofficial, which you can use for your prep, and I used all 3. Okay, so the adventuring party, they're going to continue to try and figure out what the Cult of the Dragon are trying to achieve, but ultimately they are trying to stop the evil Queen of Dragons, Tiamat, from entering Faerun, or the Forgotten Realms. You can buy this, if you don't already have it, you can buy it on the book depository. So if you're anywhere else in the world other than North America, it's probably the cheapest location because you get free shipping. Otherwise, you can buy it from Amazon. It's quite cheap there. I have an affiliate link that will be in the description for those of you who don't already have the book. Next, I have to say that it's broken up into, I would say, 4 parts. One is giving them their initial quest, and there's 2 ways you can actually get this, and then it's broken up into 2 encounters, which are sort of partly linked together, and then you have the actual Raiders Camp, which is the bulk of the material and also probably the hardest section to run. Okay, alright, so first off, after you have completed Episode 1, there's no information suggesting that you should allow the players to have a long rest during Episode 2, but I recommend that you allow them that time. The book sort of suggests that they can't wait and they need to get on with things and move on, but if you do that, they simply will not be able to manage Episode 2. I would allow them to have their long rest, get back all their hit points, get back all of their hit dice, and also any spells they might have used. What do you got here, Jack? Also, you mentioned a while ago John will no longer be with us in your videos. When will he be back? John will be back when he takes leave and I'm available at the same time. John Shackle's got a job, and I shot a lot of videos at that particular time, so hence why you won't see John for a little while. Okay, so Episode 2 is extremely easy or extremely hard. It really depends on the Dungeon Master and the players and what they do. And as I said, the chapter looks quite small, but as I said, it can be complicated. The designers, as I said, expect a flexible dungeon master who's creative, who can create things on the fly and create their own content, and they're able to deal with any kind of eventuality. The errata for this is actually pretty short. There's not an awful lot of information on the errata. I'm going to go over it, but I will put a link in the description so you can find the errata document and download that if you need to. So for episode 2, the errata is on page 15 under rear guard. The guards are now veterans. Now, it was hard enough when they were guards. Now they're veterans. Veterans are much more difficult to fight. Under general features on page 17, the first paragraph under tents, that tent subsection, you need to include as a bar Joss as being one of the characters who uses the large tent. And the second paragraph that states that there are guards on duty in front of that big tent. They are now veterans. The intention is to make sure that the players don't try to go and take out the main leaders in the very first part of the adventure. So that's your errata. Right, so the whole chapter is running on a knife's edge, literally. And what they're not supposed to do is go and engage in combat. What they're really supposed to do is, this is an infiltration chapter. Investigation and infiltration of the Cult of the Dragon and their base camp. What the adventure doesn't actually spell out is that you don't actually have to put them through that episode. There's enough things going on in that episode that even if they decide to not do it, the story will still progress, because there's an NPC who will do all the things they were supposed to do if they don't do them. So they can, they can decide to back out of this particular episode if they wanted to. That's not really going to be an issue. The story still progresses. Okay, what do you got here, Jack? What level would you recommend this? Also, would this be a bad choice for an unexperienced party? For an unexperienced party, it could go very badly. I don't think it's a very good idea. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I just think that there's potential for problems. The expected level for episode 2, the Raiders Camp, is level 2. So if they're level 1, it's going to be quite difficult. Like I said, it's not really supposed to be a combat chapter. There are ways of getting through the whole thing and not engaging in a single fight. But there's an awful lot of luck required as well. Alright, so next. So failure, if the party fails to be successful with this section, just have them captured. So if they you want it with a total party kill, or they all get knocked out, or the combat goes horribly wrong and they get overwhelmed, just have them captured. That's probably the easiest way to deal with it, and you can progress them straight to the section on the captured details in episode 2. There's a whole section on being captured, and an out if they can't figure it out themselves. Okay, so there are 2 missions at the very beginning. It starts off with the adventuring party being given a mission from Governor Nighthill. Now, Governor Nighthill asks them to locate the Raiders camp. How many raiders? He wants to know how many raiders are in the camp, who their leaders are, what the raiders' motives are, and where they plan to strike next. And if they can recover valuables from the town, that's fine, but they don't have to do that. It's not necessary. The second one is given to you by a monk by the name of Nizam Waldra. He asks the group to find his master Leeson, who he believes has been captured and needs rescuing. Leeson does in fact not need to be rescued. He's deliberately got himself captured so that he can spy on the Cult of the Dragon, but your party of characters won't know this, and they shouldn't know that information till much later on, if ever, in fact. The rewards for actually engaging in this particular episode is they're going to get 250 gold each for each character if they are successful. Allow for a small amount of change due to negotiation, but remember that the town has just been fleeced and really they don't have a lot of funds to make available. Just need a drink of water, guys. Okay, next we get on to tracking the raiders. Now, tracking the raiders requires no dice rolling on the part of the players. They don't have to, or the players' characters, should I say. The trampled grass is so obvious they can follow that path and track them down with not too much trouble. But if they decide to make a wisdom or perception check to discover more information, then they will be able to determine a little bit more information, and that's been provided in the book. I believe it's just in the first couple of sentences under tracking the raiders. I would also allow something like a survival or an investigation check to find out exactly what's going on. I'm just going to open it up so that I can reference that as I go. I'm going through my notes at the same time, but I realise that I might have to reference some of this as I go. So it's page 14, tracking the raiders. It has a little bit of information on the Cult of the Dragon if you needed that. Next we get on to page 14, still has our next lot of information. That's on the stragglers. So as they're tracking down the cult and trying to figure out where they've gone to, there are some stragglers, and really all they've done is decided to pick up a few hens that are running around on the grasslands and have a barbecue, essentially. And this consists of cultists and kobolds. The kobolds and the cultists don't get along, and really this is supposed to be a really disorganized group. They've selected a terrible campsite, so it should be pretty easy for the players' characters, without having to make any dice rolls, to sneak up on them, or at least give them advantage when they do so, because of all the boulders that surround that particular straggler group. Okay, so they can't see them. They'll be able to see the smoke from the fire from miles away, so that's nice and easy for them. And they can actually decide to circumvent or go around the stragglers, or they can sneak up on them, find out who they are, and either dispatch them or capture them and interrogate them. That's certainly an option. But bear in mind, like I said, they can simply ignore them. It seems like the smart move to ignore them, but this group of stragglers is actually really important to avoid being absolutely smashed by the second encounter as they make their way to the camp. Because if they actually do engage the stragglers and find out information from them, they'll find out about the rear guard that's been set up. That's a much more dangerous encounter that's supposed to be essentially protecting the raiders' camp from anybody pursuing them. And if they don't actually engage the stragglers, they won't have that information, and that second encounter will be really difficult. Okay, Jack, what have you got here? So this camp has draconic characters and cultists. Yes, absolutely. And also the camp will have mercenaries. It's a mixed bag of all sorts of things. I'll go into detail pretty shortly about how to deal with the camp. I just want to deal with the stuff before that. There is information on Sly Flourish's website on Hoard of the Dragon Queen episode 2 and how to run it. I don't necessarily agree with all the information he's provided, but there is some useful information there. And Merrick Black, or Merrick's Musings, I'll provide links to all of these websites in the description. He's provided some insights into dealing with that particular episode as well. Alright, so back to the stragglers. So sneaking up on them is probably the smartest thing they can do. They give them advantage because they've got boulders, and also too, there's probably squabbling taking place. The cultists and the kobolds are probably distracted. Not only that, if they decide to set up and just watch them for a little while before doing anything, they'll notice that the kobolds take their food half cooked away from the cultists, and so they're far enough away that they're not really going to be an issue straight away if there's a combat. So if a fight actually breaks out, the party should get surprise if they are successful on their stealth check, which I think is probably most likely. Distracted characters usually don't get to have a passive perception check or an active perception check, which means the first round should go in favour of the player's characters. And usually when you're surprised, you don't get to do anything on your turn. So the cultists and the kobolds will be surprised, hopefully, and they won't be able to do diddly squat. That's the whole idea behind that. The adventure actually states that in the first round they retrieve their weapons and shields, but if you're surprised, you don't get to do anything. So that won't take place until the second round. So the second round, after the cultists and the kobolds are no longer surprised, they will then retrieve their weapons or shields. I don't think they would bother putting their shields on. That's an action. I think they would simply pick up their weapons and go in for the attack or cast spells if they are capable of doing that. And in terms of when do the kobolds come into the fight, that is on round 4, when they finally get their act together, and they will only engage the player's characters if they are cultists still fighting in that particular battle. I don't think that the cultists would necessarily fight to the death, so if they get outnumbered, I would let them surrender or try and run away. It seems like a reasonable way to play that out. Okay, so I already said it's really important that the player's characters don't avoid this encounter because it could make the next encounter much worse. It allows them a lot of preparation. The second encounter is really deadly, and most of the information that they are going to get from captured kobolds or cultists will talk about there being probably a rear guard set up and the likely location. That's enough information for your players' characters to figure out where that particular ambush is going to take place, so that they have enough forewarning or foreshadowing before it actually happens. Sorry guys, I'm trying to work through this as quickly as I possibly can. So the rear guard. The rear guard you can find on page 15 of the Hoard of the Dragon Queen, and that particular section, this is this ambush that's waiting for them. They've set themselves up in a boulder-strewn location with a sort of an embankment on either side, and the players' characters, they don't actually have to walk between this location. It's just the road or path that's been taken. They could go completely around. So if they know that they're there or suspect they are there, they could simply circumvent them and go around. If they don't know they're there, things get really bad. Okay, so if they are unaware of this particular group of ambushes, which are made up of cultists, acolytes, and kobolds, then they are going to be about 20 feet away when they get to make any kind of passive perception check, which the Dungeon Master will do, and the DC is a DC 20, which is really, really hard. It's much better off if they are aware of the location, because the DC is going to be a lot lower. It's somewhere in the vicinity of a DC 10 or DC 15, depending on how far away they are. Okay, Jack, what do you got here? So how much of the book will you go through tonight? Just this chapter, or will you go more? No, I'm going to just do episode 2. I realised when I was looking at this that each of the episodes is actually quite complicated, and therefore if I try to push through it really fast like I did with the Lost Mines of Phandelver, there's just not enough information. If that makes sense, that's essentially my intention. This should be finished pretty shortly. Now, the first thing the cultists will do, if they get surprise on the group, is they're going to push boulders down onto the characters in that location, which is really, really, really bad, okay? The chances are those boulders will hit. Also, those boulders do a lot of damage. It's like 2d12 damage, which is massive. I would flatten out the damage on that. By all means, roll the attacks, but take the average on the damage for the boulders. Otherwise, that's enough damage to probably take out a second level character, certainly a first level character, really, really quickly. And you don't want to do that. That's the surprise round. If they get surprised, they don't get to do anything, and they probably will be surprised if they don't know that they're there, then that's going to go down really badly. If they know they're there, that's much better. So what happens if they know that they are there? Well, they can sneak around the back and engage them and eliminate that surprise, which is good, or they can decide to circumvent them completely, which is actually probably the best decision they can make. If they avoid the rear guard completely, that means that the rear guard stays in place and the raiders' camp are unaware that somebody is actually following them. And things will actually probably work out better for them. If they engage them and take them out, then usually there's a time frame between the raiders setting up camp, and at intervals they'll be sending runners or people back to the main camp to tell them what's taking place or what's not taking place. And the first thing that the book says that the cultists or the ambush is not going to send a runner off to the camp unless they are outnumbered. Say there's a camp, a group of maybe 7+ party members in the character's group, then they would send a runner. I would suggest you probably would send a runner straight away because it makes perfect sense to me. That's what a rear guard would normally do. Okay, pardon me, we've got water going everywhere. Now, if the cultists are having to deal with any kind of ranged attacks, it's going to be difficult terrain to get to them. It's not too far to move, but they have 3/4 cover because of the boulders, which means that's a +5 to their armor class, makes them really hard to hit. As I said, this is a deadly encounter. In all likelihood, you'll probably have a total party kill if they get surprise on the group. And how do you deal with this? Well, you can just have them all die if you really want, but I think that's unproductive. You could probably just have them captured and then take the story to the captured section in the camp, have them just taken back to the camp, and then they get the opportunity to try and escape. Okay, Jack, what do you got here? What is the player limit you recommend for this book? Okay, in terms of the number of players, I would say I have always considered 6 players at my table more than enough to deal with. Dungeons and Dragons Adventure League says 7 players, but I always found that quite a lot of work. I would recommend 6 players and stick with that. It's probably as much as you want to go with. It's a lot to deal with. The more players at the table, the harder it is to do anything. So like I said, if they do get taken down, just have them captured and then follow on from the section on being captured in the raiders' camp. The best result, as I've already said, is they avoid the whole situation completely. Alright, next. If they manage to be successful and take out the rear guard, then they can interrogate these individuals, but the problem is that these are well organized and they will have a high DC for intimidating them. Persuasion won't work, deception probably won't work, but you can probably try an intimidation. The only problem is it's a DC 20, it's very hard, and don't allow them to try and re-roll again if they fail this, okay? Alright, now we're on to the next section, which is the Raiders Camp. The Raiders Camp has a lot of information on how it's sort of set out, but as I said, the players don't have to actually go into the camp. It's actually not necessary, and they don't even have to go through the main gate. They can go around the outside of the camp. There's enough cover and handholds on the cliff face to allow them to do that. This campsite consists of about 100 kobolds and about 80 cultists, leaders and mercenaries, individuals who have been hired by the Cult of the Dragon for their raiding purposes. There's a lot of boulders, there's a lot of bushes, there's caves that they can hide in and take short and long rests if they need to. There's guard towers. Now both guard towers create problems because it's set up in a plateau with one entry point into it, and it's fairly narrow, and there's a guard tower right at that entry point, and it's guarded by kobolds. Now kobolds aren't necessarily the best fighters or individuals for anything, but they still have a horn. All they got to do is blow a horn. That won't take them anything more than an interaction to do, and suddenly the whole camp knows that they're under attack or somebody's trying to get in, and that's bad because you can't deal with 180 enemies. So getting into a fight is just going to get them captured and eventually killed if they are unable to escape. But there is information on here to make sure that doesn't take place. There are a bunch of prisoners that have been taken, and that some of them are from Greenest and some are from previous excursions or raids around the Sword Coast. And there's about 8, and you can try and rescue them or get information from the prisoners if you want. You can have the players do that. The best result for getting into the camp is that the players just walk in, that they don't dress up, that they don't even say anything, literally. They just wave and walk in as if they own the place. Because apparently this particular Cult of the Dragon, when they did their raid, didn't organise how they're going to come back, and they just sort of stroll in at intervals. If they start dressing up as cultists, which nobody else is doing right now when they're coming back from the camp, that'll probably give them away. If they try to use passwords and deception and try to make an issue of it, coming back in, that can create problems. This is counterintuitive to a player who's probably going to think they have to do something to get into the camp, and that can create problems. There's a whole bunch of tents, and on your map on page 16, all of those funny looking circly things, those are tents. The bigger the circly thing, the bigger the tent. And there's quite a large tent located at is number 2. This is where all the leaders are set up. The plateau is level 1, where the main guard tower is. And then there's a marker that's marked 3, and that is where you'll find Leeson. He's been chained up on a post away from the rest of the group so that he can be easily watched. And yeah, essentially that's where he's located, if you were wondering. There are 2 locations that the players should not be able to get into. One is the main leader's camp, or where it's marked 2. Okay, Resmar and Kairath and Frulam, they shouldn't really be engaging with them that much. They should be off limits. You don't want them trying to take them out. It wouldn't be able to do it anyway. And also there is a cave where, if they learn about it, it's heavily guarded. They won't be able to get in because there isn't a password they know. All the guards have got specific instructions only to let in people that they specifically know, and they won't know who's supposed to be allowed in and out of there. And so the traffic going in and out of that particular cave where the hatchery is, where they're trying to hatch dragon eggs, and where they're storing all the treasure, they won't be able to gain access to. They'll know of it there and probably be able to see it from a distance, but that's the extent of it. The camp its alertness is not high, okay? As long as they don't do anything that sort of gives themselves away, they should be fine. If they bump into Kairath and they engaged in the battle with Kairath, he's going to know who they are automatically. But there is a mechanic here. It's a DC5 Charisma Check to see if one of the cultists or kobolds recognizes them from the raid or from the Greenest and Flames section. It's very, very low as a check, but it's still possible that they could fail that. Hence, there are some problems with that, which means they might get captured if they wind up in a fight, because they're not going to be able to fight off the entire camp. But there is mechanics around that. Bumping into Kairath is probably the worst scenario you could have. This particular section doesn't give you much more than that. It assumes that the Dungeon Master will fill in all the other gaps in terms of what's taking place, whether there's games of chance taking place, who's eating what. Most of it's probably going to consist of resting, eating food, drinking, generally just recovering from all of their hard work. So you can play that up as much as you like, but there isn't a lot of guidance around that. There is information in Merrick's Musings and Sly Flourish to fill out the campsite and give you a few ideas about how you can run that though. Okay, captured. If they wind up captured, and it's possible that they might get captured, they're probably going to find that it's not going to be too much of a big deal. If they get interrogated, they're probably going to be sentenced to death. Resmar would certainly be interested in that taking place. Frulam Mondarth is going to be doing the interrogating, and if they fail the interrogation, which they probably will, Somebody will anyway. Then they're going to get captured, but they don't get executed, as far as I can tell from the book, till the next day, and that's probably the way to do it. That way that gives them time to escape. If they fail the escape, then Leeson, the monk who's been captured, will rescue them. So there is an out for them, even if they fail. There's lots of built-in information to make sure that this doesn't turn into a complete disaster for your party. So that's the captured section. It's pretty simple. It's only consisting of about 3 or 4 paragraphs of information, but it should be enough to get you through that. If they decide to actually explore the camp, which they can do, I guess the worst case scenario is they will wind up captured, but they could also be roped into doing jobs around the camp, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. That will help them integrate into the whole campsite so that people think they belong there. So that's actually good. It also gives them an opportunity to wander around and ask questions. Most of the cultists and kobolds and mercenaries, but kobolds and mercenaries in particular, won't be particularly interested in or concerned about them asking questions. Most of it will be sort of matter-of-fact sort of information, and they don't have to be provided with everything that's been bullet pointed under exploring the camp and what they might learn if they ask questions. So that's the basic concept behind exploring the camp. The whole idea is, if they do go into the camp, whether they come through the front gate or clamber down the cliff face from the bushes and boulders on the edge of the cliff face that surrounds this plateau, that they can ask questions, find out where Leeson is, find out where the leader's camp is, find out who the leaders are, find out that there is a cave where there's a hatchery and dragon eggs being hatched, find out the general location of treasure. Hi Black Devil Mamba. Yes, I finally got the time zones correct. Okay, I'm glad to hear it. Hello everybody. Yes, hello to you too. There's only a few of us today. Okay, so that's exploring the camp. It assumes that you will be able to do all of that. I think my group, when they ran this, they actually took on guard duty, which allowed them access to lots of locations. What they couldn't do was get guard duty at the main tent where the leaders hang out. So they couldn't sort of decide to use that as an excuse to try to take out the leaders early on in the adventure. And they couldn't get guard duty in front of the hatchery or the cave where the treasure and the dragon eggs were. Otherwise, of course, that would create a whole lot of problems further on in the adventure. That was just out of their league. But guard duty at the front of the gate, guard duty around the prisoners, guard duty at other locations. Guard duty for Leeson's actually not a bad idea, because it gives them the opportunity to talk to Leeson, the monk who's been captured, and ask him a few questions without anybody getting too upset. Leeson doesn't actually want to be rescued. He's actually deliberately got captured. He's found out most of the information that they will find out if they explore the camp and ask questions. So this basically means, as I said, that they don't actually have to do this whole chapter. They could just wait and greenest us if they wanted, and Leeson will eventually escape. He's been badly beaten, but he's still capable of escaping. Apparently he has a knife tucked into his boot, which allows him a way of getting out of the camp, and he would just climb up the cliff face. It's a very easy check. It's like a DC10 check, athletics or strength check to get out. Lots of footholds, no rope required, and I don't even think they need no ladder, nothing like that. In fact, it actually says in the book that getting up that cliff face doesn't even really require any kind of check. It's that easy. The only reason they might make a check is to make sure that no rubble or debris falls down, and they can do it stealthily. And yes, you can ask them to make a stealth check to clamber up the cliff face. That's really up to you. There is guidance around how to do that. If they decide to rescue Leeson, he's too weak to resist them. He will go with them, and they can essentially just walk back out of the camp, or they can clamber up the cliff face and leave. Those are all options. At the end and conclusion of this particular episode, they should be getting a number of XP rewards. If you're using milestones, they will simply gain another level, which means they'll go to level 3, so they're at level 3 for episode 3. That's how it's supposed to work for the milestones. Otherwise, there's guidance around awarding XP for the rest of the adventure. It's spelled out, it's fairly clear. I don't really want to go into any more detail because it's not information that's new. It's in the book, it's on page 19, and yeah. And things like rescuing prisoners, rescuing Leeson, making sure they set up a decoy, making sure they find out information. So every piece of information, they should be getting XP rewards. And as I said, this whole chapter is not really designed to be, particularly in the campsite, as an encounter for combat. That's not the intention at all. And that's really the extent of episode 2, which, amazingly, I've managed to actually go over in less than an hour. Thank God for that, before my voice disappears. So I'm going to answer questions after this live stream. I'm going to stay on for a little while so you can ask me questions about this adventure and other things if you have questions about any other details that might be taking place. Will I be doing episode 3 of Hoard of the Dragon Queen next weekend? Probably not, because it's a lot more complicated. It'll take me more time to prepare. I will probably next weekend, I will run a monster manual tactics workshop again. That seemed to be popular. I had a lot of fun doing it. I kind of like doing it. With the humidity here, painting's really not really much of an option, I've discovered recently. So doing a painting sort of session isn't really an option. So monster manual tactics is probably what I'm going to do a workshop on next weekend as a live stream. As I said, by all means start throwing out any questions about episode 2. If you found this useful or helpful, please share, like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. I'm going to say to people who have been sharing my videos, I'm really finding that so helpful. The number of people who are sharing my videos has meant that my subscriber count has gone up. The amount of people watching my stuff has increased. It's been fantastic. If you have questions, as I said, you can ask them after this live stream. I'll stay on. But otherwise, just put a comment below and I will answer your questions. Until next time, keep rolling those 20s.